Aloha mai kako. Welcome to the 10th Ke'o Center for Sustainable Island Food Systems Brown Bag Speaker Series event addressing the topic of agroecology and sustainable food systems education in the UH system. My name is Ioane, and on behalf of the center, I want to thank all of our guests and presenters for taking the time to attend today. Also, please scan the QR code in the bottom left corner of the current slide to see previous events that we've hosted on our new webpage under the Brown Bag Speaker Series tab. Additionally, I'll be sending out to all of our registered guests a YouTube link with a recording of this webinar within a few days, and I'll also be posting links within the chat to access that new page that we created along with all of our panelists' relevant content during the presentations today. So the speaker series is just one of the projects that we're working on here at the Ke'o Center, which is an initiative within the UH system created, co-directed rather by both Dr. Albie Miles and Dr. Noah Lincoln. So one of our key objectives here is to collaborate with folks at UH and across the entire food systems landscape in Hawaii in order to highlight the work being done by different individuals and organizations with the goal of improving our local food system. So this includes addressing topics such as food security, justice and equity within the food system, ecological sustainability, education, and food system policy. Oftentimes we found that this work is being conducted without much public visibility. So we're here trying to make connections by building and maintaining important relationships, as well as sharing the work being done with all of these individuals and organizations with the people who it significantly affects. And overall, we just want to better identify what the university can do to support and improve food systems transformation in Hawaii. So in addition to hosting events like this, the Ke'o Center has been established to engage in a number of other activities to include research, data collection, education, community engagement, policy analysis, and different monitoring activities. The intention is to really better measure and realize food sustainability goals by creating and maintaining the social, intellectual, economic, and political spaces that we feel are necessary to drive systemic change in a forward direction for Hawaii's food system. And you can learn more about the center and see some of our past and current projects dedicated to this work on our Ke'o Center website. As I said, I'll drop the link for that in the chat as we get moving too. So a few housekeeping items for today. All the audience interaction is limited to the Q&A feature within the Zoom platform. So please feel free to write your questions as they occur to you. And any questions that we can't address within the allotted time will be answered via email from our panelist guests following the event's conclusion. Now, as I mentioned earlier, our guest today will be discussing agroecology and sustainable food systems education in the University of Hawaii system and looking at programs and practices for realizing core competencies. Today's event's a little bit different from past episodes as it'll run for about an hour and a half. And after all of our guests have presented, we have a significant amount of time allotted for addressing questions from the audience. I'm very happy to introduce our panelists. Today, we're welcoming Dr. Albie Miles, Associate Professor in the Sustainable Community Food Systems Program at UHWO. Dr. Daniela Elliott, Associate Professor in the Sustainable Agriculture Program at Leeward Community College. Dr. Matthew Lau, Assistant Professor of Indigenous Knowledge and Practice in the Sustainable Community Food Systems Program at UHWO. Dr. Noah Lincoln, Associate Professor of Indigenous Crops and Cropping Systems in the College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources at UH Mānoa, and Dr. Subhashni Raj, Assistant Professor in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at UH Mānoa. Albie, if you could please start us off now.
Very good. Thank you, Ioane. And it looks like Noah's joining us just now. Welcome, Noah. Just to frame this conversation is a number of us have been involved in developing programs and teaching courses in sustainable agriculture, agroecology, sustainable food systems over the last decade or so. And we wanted to begin helping folks understand what is the landscape of sustainable food systems programs and coursework across the University of Hawaii system, begin a dialogue around how can we improve the pathways in and through the UH system from the community colleges all the way through to graduate education. And so this was intended as the first of hopefully several conversations where we begin discussing how how we can improve those pathways and reach a set of core learning objectives that are emerging in the scientific literature around agroecology and sustainable food systems. So the way that we're going to run this session, as Ioane mentioned, is we're all going to take about 10 minutes to present what it is that we do, where our programs come from, what are some of the core elements of the curriculum that we're delivering to our students, different learning opportunities within those courses and programs, and then also transition the conversation toward what are the things, the challenges that we face as faculty members and program leads to help our students realize some of those core learning objectives that we think are important in a sustainable food systems education at the post-secondary level. We are starting today, and Ioane, if they are available, we are reading literature in the area of learning theory and sustainable agriculture education. And I asked the panelists to reflect on some of the key learning objectives that are being identified in this emerging literature on food systems education. So when Ioane gets a chance, you can drop that into the chat. Otherwise, we can follow up in an email. But I wanted to provide some kind of theoretical references for some of the work that we are doing. So I think what we will do is begin our series of brief presentations, starting with Daniela Elliott at Leeward Community College and her Sustainable Agriculture program. And then both Matthew Lau and I will have an opportunity to present on the Sustainable Community Food Systems program. We'll transition to Noah Lincoln, and he'll talk about his program in the context of the College of Tropical Agriculture. And then lastly, we'll hear from Subhashni Raj in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning. So Ioane is going to be dropping a series of links to kind of help us flesh out and provide additional resources as we go along. So Daniela, please take it away.
Aloha mai kako. Thanks for having me. I'm Daniela Elliott. I've been a faculty at Leeward Community College since 2014. I help coordinate the Sustainable Agriculture program. And Ioane is helping me with the slides, so I'm gonna ask him to go forward a little bit. So you can go to the next one. And I actually have a link to some data that Leeward Community College makes it available so we can see who our students are. So I just wanted to start out by talking about our students because they're in the center of what I do, right? So Ioane, if you can click on that link. And this data here is for the Sustainable Agriculture program. So you can see that in terms of age, we're pretty diverse. So people of all ages come through our program. But what this data is not capturing is that anybody can take our classes. The majority of our classes can be taken by people in other majors. So they can be an education major, a business major, but they're interested in sustainable ag. So they may take a class for their science requirement. So a lot of times we have high school students doing early college classes, taking classes next to people in their 70s. So that creates a very diverse environment that I truly love teaching in. I think it's really cool to have that kind of diversity. And you can also see that we have 34% of financial aid recipients, 20% are Pell recipients, and our veteran population is quite high compared to Leeward Community College's population, so a little bit over 25%. And Ioane, if you can scroll down to the bottom, you can see first generation students is half of our student population, and a little bit below, so if you can keep scrolling, you can see the credit load on the left. We have half full-time, half part-time students. So a lot of our students are working full-time while they're taking classes. And I always take that into consideration because I know it's just not easy to work full-time, work 2 jobs, and have to go to school. So we can go back to the presentation now and continue from that. So that just gives you a little glimpse of who our students are. They also come into the program. Some really know they want to study agriculture. Other people just really want to grow their own food. They want to learn about ag. So it's just a diversity of people. I have folks that grew up farming, but then went to the military and now are returning to school and they want to be in ag. So it's just super cool to have all that. So next slide, please. I know this is super boring, but this is some of the degrees and certificates that we offer. So the first one is 60 credits, and that's where most of our students are doing. But if we have a student who, again, is not an ag major, but they want a certificate in agriculture, they can do that. There's a certificate with 34 credits and one with 30, about 26 to 30 credits. So you can be an education major, but because you want to incorporate ag into teaching, you may do a certificate in sustainable ag. So the next slide is a list of our classes. This is just a sample. So you can see super diverse. We teach organic ag, soil, aquaponics, horticulture, plant propagation. We have a bunch of new classes coming online. So the idea is that people, while they're doing their 2-year degree or certificate, they are taking agriculture classes, not just biology classes. When I went to school, I was dying to take an agriculture class and I couldn't take anything because all the requirements wouldn't even allow for that, right? So I feel that our students benefit from being able to, from the first semester on, take an ag class and feel connected, not just to the material, but also to the environment that we work in. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. You can go to the next slide. So one of the things I'm super proud about our program is that we have a really strong place-based curriculum. We have been developing curriculum that incorporates local examples, local knowledge. So just really important of teaching in a way that people feel, one, appreciated, but two, part of the learning. So they get to create materials that other people get to use. So I can talk for an hour about open educational resources. This is for another time, but if you have any questions about that, I'll be happy to answer later. And then the next slide is kind of a segue to that, but with videos. So using videos that connect people with the agriculture industry, and so people have an idea what jobs are out there. How can I be part of this, not just industry, but this movement, right? So it's just so diverse that we wanted to showcase folks in the field. Noah is part of one of these videos, so you guys should check it out. Okay, so next slide. I just want to take a moment to talk about the farm that we have on campus, because our classes truly rely on the farm. I feel like without having that environment, we wouldn't be able to do a lot of the hands-on learning. So I'm just super excited to really incorporate, how do you install irrigation? How do you use machinery? How do you work with tools? So when they move on, they have an idea and an understanding of how to do these kinds of things. Even if they don't end up working in the field, at least they know what needs to happen. So the next slide is just an example of a class that I'm actually currently teaching this class. And we do a full CSA for students, faculty, and staff at Leeward. So the students go through planting from seed all the way to harvest. It's a 16-week course and super fun. So lots of really good veggies. So the next slide is, I want to talk about our internship. So the students have these building blocks, right? They're learning through classes, but then based on what they want to do, they choose an internship site, and we partner them with industry, and then they get to do what they're interested in. So lots of different places that students can go to do that internship. And I do think that's where the learning actually happens. That's where things start to click. So I feel that once our students leave our program, they either go to work in the industry, or then they transfer to UHWO Oahu. And we'll be talking more about that later, this pathway that we have been building from Leeward to UHWO Oahu and hopefully to Mānoa. Some of our students do transfer to Mānoa, but that right now it's kind of rare that that happens, and we can talk about those barriers later. But the pathway to UHWO Oahu is super straightforward right now. So they take advantage of that. And I think that's all I have. So be happy to answer questions later on. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Daniela. I think I will go ahead and pick it up and do a brief description of the Sustainable Community Food Systems Program. Then I'm going to hand it over to Matt to flesh out his specific role in engaging students in traditional ecological knowledge and practice as a key element of the Sustainable Community Food Systems Program. So I'll share a couple slides here real quick. And can you guys see my slide set? Okay. Albie Miles, Sustainable Community Food Systems. I'm going to provide a little bit of context for the nature of this program because it's a bit of a departure from many traditional ag programs. I'm going to be referring to, the literature I dropped into the chat function is referencing some of these key learning objectives that are emerging in this educational theory literature. And it emphasizes that some of the key learning objectives for sustainable food systems should include systems thinking, critical reflection, diverse ways of knowing, practical skill building, multi-context communication, team skills, collective action, and advocacy. And so I'll try to, in very short order, present how we are going about doing some of that. But first, I want to provide a little bit of context for this. So I myself was a student at UC Santa Cruz in their ecological horticulture program. It's a part of the Center for Agroecology. And at the Center for Agroecology at UC Santa Cruz, there's both biophysical scientists and social scientists looking at different aspects of the food system, both regionally, nationally, and globally. And so I was very much influenced by both developing an understanding of practical horticultural skills, but also being exposed to the scientific literature in both the biophysical sciences and the social sciences around sustainable food systems. And so that's some personal education that I brought to the Sustainable Community Food Systems Program. While I was at UC Santa Cruz, we formed the Sustainable Agriculture Education Association to kind of mainstream this transdisciplinary or integrated approach to learning about sustainable agriculture and food systems. And over the last, since 2006, we've convened a conference every 2 years to help faculty members, program leads, administrators understand how sustainable agriculture and food systems curriculum and programs can be developed within land grant and other institutions. And so that happens every 2 years. The conference is going to happen in 2026. While I was in graduate school at Berkeley, one of the things that occurred was the Great Economic Recession, and there were food crises all over the world. And a colleague at the time, his name is Nathan McClintock, we thought, I think it's very difficult for young people to actually understand what's happening. There's these deep historical causes of these crises that we keep finding ourselves in. But I don't believe that our students have the capacity to actually explain and understand how things such as an economic recession can lead to these food crises around the world. So we created this food system minor at Berkeley at the time, and it's really designed as a multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary approach to help students understand the food system. And so that's a minor at Berkeley that students can continue to take. In 2013, I was hired to help develop this new Sustainable Community Food Systems program. It was founded by the folks at Mānoa Organic Farms, Gary and Kakui, Mauna Kea Fourth, Kamoelo Enos, and Monique Marinesco at UHWO in political science. And it was really designed as an interdisciplinary approach to studying the food system and sustainability here in Hawaii and beyond. And importantly, Kamehameha Schools was one of the original funders of this initiative. And so we had the participation of the nonprofit sector, Mānoa Organic Farms, our local foundations serving the indigenous community of Hawaii, to create a new multidisciplinary program in food systems and sustainability at West Oahu. And so we continue that partnership through to this day. And so unlike a kind of traditional ag program, it's really broader in focus. It's really helping young people think critically and systemically about this food system that we all are part of and dependent upon, and engage actively in thinking through what are the key challenges that we face and how do we overcome those obstacles to achieving greater equity and sustainability in the food system. And not exclusively going into agriculture, but going into different sectors of the food and agricultural economy that include, business and planning and research and health sciences and education. And I say that because, there's often a misconception between, the larger food system and agriculture. And so I want to make sure that we are training people to think at a grander scale about this complex social ecological system, and that there are many of the challenges that we face in contemporary society are bound up in the nature of the food system. And of course, agriculture plays an important role, but is not the be all end all of the food system. And so just a couple of examples that lie beyond agricultural production itself is there's one report after another that's coming out about the ecological and social impacts of the modern food system. These are not purely production issues. These are issues of food access. These are issues of how we produce food, et cetera. So the food system is this key driver of global environmental change and negative public health externalities, and we need to understand why that is. And driving toward a local example is we see these very high rates of chronic illness and premature mortality in the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander community. I want our young people to understand, where does this come from? How is this socially constructed? And if this is socially constructed, we have the ability to socially take apart and create a new food and agricultural environment that is more conducive of biocultural restoration, public health and nutrition for the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander community and everyone else. So, with that said, we've constructed over the last decade a series of classes in the Sustainable Community Food Systems program. I'll mention a couple and how we approach it. The SCFS 300, the Survey of Sustainable Community Food Systems, is really looking at the origins and evolution of Hawaii's modern food system. How did we get to this particular configuration of the food and agricultural sector where there was once a fully self-sufficient population of indigenous Hawaiians to now a system where we are 85% dependent upon food imports, right? We have high rates of chronic illness and so forth. So helping young people understand the nature of the food system that we are all embedded in, and introducing them to different actors in the food and agricultural sector who are trying to affect some semblance of change. SCFS 310, Introduction to Agroecology, is really looking at what are the key ecological challenges that we face in the modern food and agricultural sector? And what do alternative forms of agriculture, such as organic or agroecologically designed farming systems, what do they have to offer us in modern society to address some of the ecological challenges that are being driven by modern agricultural production practices? SCFS 320 is really the hands-on experiential component, or one of the hands-on and experiential components that really explores what are those basic practices of soil fertility, pest management, and so forth that lead to more positive ecological outcomes in agriculture. Another key class, the politics of food, taught by Monique Marinesco, is really more of a political economy of the food system. How did we get at the national level to the food system that we have? What is the influence of public policy and the private sector in terms of influencing such things as the school lunch program that we have at the national level? And then I'll share this last class. I think that, normative thinking or ethical thinking is an important part of the learning objectives in sustainable food systems. And that class is really designed to help us tackle what are the ethical issues in modern food and agriculture and help develop the capacity of young people to think morally or ethically about such issues as hunger or biocultural restoration or the moral status of non-human beings that we use for food. Last two things I'll mention, then I'll turn it over to Matt, is, we ask of our students that they spend an entire year doing senior practica. One is we place them on a commercial farming operation or in a biocultural restoration effort, and they work alongside the practitioner out in the field, developing those basic skills. At the same time, they're reading about the agroecological literature and being asked to translate between the theoretical knowledge around sustainable agriculture and what's actually happening out in the field. And that's our sustainable farming system practicum. And then the last one I'll mention is the senior food system practicum. And this relates to the kind of learning outcome of advocacy. And that is we place students in an internship with the Purple Maya Foundation, the Food Plus Policy Program, and students learn kind of A to Z, what is the state legislative process? How do you track bills through the legislative cycle? What are the key food and agricultural bills and what are the advantages and disadvantages of each, and communicating some of that to the public and learning the skill set of writing and delivering oral testimony for or against from their personal perspective on these different bills that are in front of the state legislature. So in total, what we're trying to do here is tackle multiple learning objectives simultaneously through our coursework. And I'll turn this over to Matt now, is that we have had the good fortune of maintaining a relationship with Kamehameha Schools. And several years ago, we asked of Kamehameha Schools to support funding for hiring an Indigenous scholar to teach courses, at the intersection of Western science and traditional ecological knowledge and practice. And recently we were able to hire Dr. Matthew Lau to kind of flesh out that section of the Sustainable Community Food Systems program. So I wanted to turn it over to Matt to give his remarks. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Albie. And thanks to Noah and Albie and Ioane for organizing this series. It's been, I think, a really excellent contribution to the overall conversation for food system transformation and really driving a lot of really important projects. So I'm really happy to be a part of this and be included. And I'm always thankful to being able to work with such an excellent group of colleagues. So thanks to everyone else, and thanks to everyone for coming today. Yeah, and so for me, so my role, and I want to talk a little bit about, sort of who I am, how I approach my role in the SCFS program and the larger, set of food system transformation projects that we're working on from both within the university and also with our projects embedded in community. I come to this, my training, my background in academia, my training is all in ecology, and I got into ecology because I was really driven to really address environmental challenges that I was experiencing directly in my personal life from really practicing foodways that I was learning growing up, both both in Southern California, where part of my family is from, and then also here in Hawaii, where another part of my family is from. So I grew up sort of split between here and there, and a lot of the things I did when I was growing up was, I went fishing, I went scuba diving, I went and harvested shellfish, and eventually I found out in a high school project that the place where we usually fished in Southern California was a Superfund site, right? And I realized that experience sort of at that intersection of like kind of the cultural practices and also my interests in an academic lens really propelled me forward in my career. But all my training is in ecology, but I've also worked in agriculture. I've worked in an organic nursery. I've worked in horticulture, and then most recently, before I was hired on at UHWO, I worked at Organic Farms as a mahiai, as a farmer working on the land, and then also in the education side. And I really was, I've been very thankful to have had the opportunity to now work, again, focused within academia, and to try and be more inclusive, right, of the various, people who are contributing to the kind of work that Albie and Daniela were already just describing. And I really see my role actually not as being the direct instructor for most of the knowledge content that we're describing, the indigenous knowledge and practice. I am not the holder of all of that information. I hold a very small part of that. And most of what I see my role in this and the work that we're doing, I think both Albie and I and many of our colleagues that we're doing is we're trying to create more space in institutions like UH to be more inclusive of these knowledge systems. And something I think we'll talk about more today, Albie is already mentioning, right, is there is a recognition that we need to address these root causes that are underlying much of the decision making, much of the, often the poor decisions that we're making in policy and in agriculture. And I think from the lens of indigenous knowledge and practice, a lot of what I'm working to implement is courses for students where they're developing critical thinking skills. They're developing a critical awareness of issues so that they can understand and progressively develop their own decision making and their own reasoning to understand, oh, we need to address, we need to ask questions about, why is it that most of the literature we're reading is not written from, say, a Native Hawaiian perspective or a Native American perspective. The science, when we're talking about science, we almost exclusively are talking about Western science, right? Even though we recognize that indigenous peoples, many people throughout the world who are not from Western Europe, right? They have their own systems of knowledge creation that would internally be considered scientific for the most part, but it's often excluded from that conversation. So we've been working together to stand up a number of new courses, of new programs to create more space to have those conversations, especially so that students, other faculty, staff, administration, our community can move forward and be more understanding and inclusive of different ways of knowing and move toward addressing these root causes. So I just want to mention a couple of things that I guess maybe just one class in addition to what Albie is mentioning, or I guess a handful of classes. I and some other colleagues, we teach a number of courses that are more directly experiential toward practice, like building on the understanding that many of them are getting from taking courses from LCC with Daniela and Heather and or going to organic farms or going to Hawaiʻi or going to a number of community organizations, right? We're teaching courses on mahiai kalo. We're teaching courses on local i'a management. We're teaching courses on ahupua'a systems thinking and management. And so there's a sort of core practice learning, directly learning from practitioners and thinking about it in a larger food system context, courses like that. And then also I've been developing and expanding on courses like we have a course, SCFS 455, which is indigenous and traditional ecological knowledge and Western science, which we're calling a meeting of wisdoms, which is really thinking about those things I was mentioning earlier. It's like, well, how do we go about thinking about how Western institutions, Western academic institutions have been approaching other folks who've classically been excluded from those systems? How do we move forward in a more productive way, in a more inclusive way? So that's in general the kind of work that we've been doing. And I think, Albie wanted us to also sort of speak to challenges. And so I'll hold off on a few of those things when we can cycle back through. But hopefully we'll get to a place I'd like to talk about a couple of other projects. One of them being a Alaskan Native Hawaiian supporting grant that we have, and also we're working on editing a special issue on ITech and food system education that we can talk about a little bit more later.
Great, thank you, Matt. Why don't I kick it over to Noah? Noah, if you could pick it up where Matt left off and talk about your program and courseworks.
Yes. Oh, here way at the end. Here we go. Yeah, so thanks everyone, and yeah, gonna kind of shift over to UH Mānoa campus and the College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources, and discuss a little bit in the context of our theme today of food system education. So just wanted to start with a little bit of the deep history. So, the College of Agriculture actually predates the whole rest of the university system in Hawaii. So it's the oldest component of our kind of formal higher education here in the state, with the College of Agriculture and Mechanical Arts being established in 1907. Followed shortly by the College of Hawaiian Farm in 1911. And so there's a very long, history within the college there, which also means there's some deeply embedded ways of thinking and doing things that may be harder to evolve from in some ways than, for instance, I'll be coming in and creating a new program that doesn't have that, institutional baggage and legacies that can sometimes slow down our evolution. And just kind of a broad overview, the university or the College of Tropical Ag has kind of, we've had a long recent history of administrative turnover. So about every, 4 to 6 years over the past 40 years, we've had a new dean, and that kind of results in a lot of re-envisioning and reprioritization of the college. But this is kind of the current framing around the priorities of CTAHR in these 4 grand challenge initiatives, which are articulated as, resilient communities, vibrant food system and security, ecosystem health, and workforce and economic development. So within the college, there's 6 departments: plant and environmental sciences, molecular biosciences, human nutrition and animal science, tropical plant and soil sciences, natural resources and environmental management, and then family and consumer sciences. And when, I think about these different departments in the context of a food system, this is a little diagram we did in a proposal to the Vice Provost for Academic Excellence. So when we think about a food system and all the components that go into that of growing food and getting it to consumers and that whole piece, I would say that CTAHR encompasses the food system across these departments, but that there's not a lot of overlap between them. So it's a very siloed system where we look at individual components of the food system, and I think we do that well within CTAHR. But what I would argue we don't do as well is really taking a system approach and how these pieces strongly interact with each other. And, for instance, in my department of tropical plant and soil sciences, is a lot of focus on the production of agriculture. But, we don't necessarily interface well enough with NRAM to think about, well, what are the environmental impacts of that production? Or we might not integrate well enough with human nutrition and think about what are the health and wellness components of that production, or how does it relate to consumer habits or market demand. And, when we do that, when we just look at one piece of the puzzle, a lot of times we can exacerbate problems in another part of the system. And so, yeah, I would say this is kind of our current state in the college. And several years ago, as part of a project, we did a large network analysis of the food system in Hawaii, and included like an extensive component of the university. And I'm not going to try to get you to understand this, crazy diagram, neural network looking diagram here on the left. But one of the big outcomes or insights, I guess, from this work was that, the university, particularly in our education, slightly less so in our research, but also in our research, is really quite insular, and that we're not well integrated into the active components of our food system. And I think it's a tremendous lost opportunity, both for the education component of having our students be engaged in real world problems, but also in the perspective that students put in a lot of work. It's a lot of work to go to university. You do all these assignments and programs and this, and that's a whole labor force that could be brought to bear on pressing problems in our food system currently. Instead of doing, some theoretical assignment, our students could be working on a real problem that a real farm has, and provide real solutions while gaining that experience and education. And I just do want to say that, this study, we did it, was probably like 8 years ago now. And I do want to say that I believe we've seen quite a bit of progress. And, I think there's great examples. Dr. Tai Ma's comes to mind, where she has a nutrient analysis class. And now all of her student practicum exams are them developing a nutrient plan for a real world farm. So these students go to a farm, they work with the farmers, understand their production, understand their practices, understand their issues, and then, take what they've learned in the class through Dr. Ma's, and then create, these holistic nutrient management programs for the farms. And I think that's a wonderful example of how the learning and the solutions can be strongly integrated. And so I think we're getting better, but like I said, there's a long history of the way things have been done, and it's sometimes hard to change. So this is just a brief overview of the undergraduate and graduate programs offered at the College of Tropical Ag. So we have 9 undergraduate programs, and then another 9 graduate programs. They don't perfectly overlap. And then again, they kind of, like we saw in that food systems diagram, cover, most of the components of the food system in a targeted way. And so, yeah, so specifically, I'm a professor of the tropical agriculture and the environment program, which is really the kind of agricultural production component of the food system. And so within that, we have 5 kind of focus tracks. So environmental soil science, pests and diseases, urban horticulture, plant sciences, and plant production and management. And, I would say that our program does focus and emphasize on the technical skills of these disciplines. And so in a lot of ways, I think the career pathways that, our program is gearing students toward, is possible more like research or civil service type oriented jobs, right? So, I mean, if you, took an environmental soil sciences pathway, I don't think you come out with the skill set to then be like a farmer, but you would probably be a great like NRCS soil scientist candidate or something like that. And, I mean, I think there's a lot of value in the technical components, right? Like, it's really important we can articulate the problems, but we also like need training in the technical skills to solve them. But I would argue that I think CTAHR leans a little too far in that direction and doesn't spend enough time providing that system approach and the context that allow students to really critically think about the problems. Instead, it is a slightly more, again, like siloed approach to some of these issues. So in addition to the 5 pathways, we also offer a certificate, so an agribusiness certificate. And I actually think this is a great certificate program that partners with the business school and other departments to kind of provide the business component of agriculture, and does, I think, help equip students with thinking about how to actually take these technical skills and build the entrepreneurship side of applying those skill sets outside of the university. And yeah, I just wanted to briefly highlight a couple things about kind of looking forward. And so the Dean of CTAHR, Parwinder Graywall, was supposed to be here today, but he had a conflict come up. So I did want to briefly try to represent his vision, in which he is currently tasked a number of faculty within the college to try to conceptualize a more applied agriculture degree, and kind of envision this as a 3-year pathway that heavily makes use of our network of research and extension stations across the state, with the idea of allowing students to remain more embedded in their communities, while going through university. I think it's a good idea. It's a nice visionary idea. I do think there's a lot of the logistical and practical administrative components that would need to be worked out, but that is something that the college has initiated in terms of starting to think about how to actualize. Also through a current grant that Albie and Matt and Danny are all on together. One of the outcomes we hope to do is that there are current mechanisms in University of Mānoa that allow for these more de-siloed approaches. And so one of them is there's a degree in interdisciplinary studies at the university that essentially allows students to build their own major. And there are some kind of prefabricated interdisciplinary studies pathways. And so one thing we are working on now is to start to build out a kind of food systems pathway at UH Mānoa. So taking existing courses on the books, getting existing professors and mentors on board, and kind of building a pathway in this interdisciplinary studies that allows students to take a kind of more holistic view of food system science. And we've been pursuing this in several years, and pursuing different large grants that might help better build these networks. And but yeah. And then yeah, just a brief note on our graduate education. The only things I wanted to say is that in the past few years, has been a good evolution of professional degrees. So degrees that are meant to be less about an academic pathway, but are terminal degrees with kind of the idea the students go into the professions after their master's. And so NREM, Natural Resource Management, now offers a Master's of Environmental Management. UHWO Plant and Soil Science offers a Master's of Plant, Professional Masters of Plant Science. And so these programs are quite a bit more embedded. They're not thesis track graduate programs, but rather programs that are more based on experiential project design and capstone projects that are typically embedded within community and within industry. So I think that's a positive evolution we're seeing in the college. And just that, you know, other than that, the research track masters they're highly individualized, right? You work with a specific lab or a specific professor, and either the student or the professor or a combination of the two really kind of determine, right, the specific focus of these masters and PhD directions. And so, you know, there's a lot of opportunity there, but it really really depends on the professor's scope of work. And yeah, I feel like I'm going on long, so I was going to go over my specific lab a little bit, but maybe I'm just going to stop here. And yeah, but I would just say in my lab, we're really trying to take a holistic approach to these issues, really bring a lot of interdisciplinary study to take a system-based approach to our indigenous crop revitalization. And you know, our lab really engages in a broad range of you know, kind of context and values and history, as well as bringing, I think, these technical science-based solutions to all of that. So anyway, I will stop there. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Noah.
Yeah.
Let's turn it over to Subhashni from Urban and Regional Planning, and then we should still have plenty, 15, 20 minutes for Q&A. I have some prepared questions for the panelists. Thank you, Noah. And Subhashni, take it away.
Thanks, Albie. You all can see my slides on your end? Okay, great. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this brown bag. As Albie mentioned, I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, which also means that I'm situated a little bit differently than everyone else who went before me. I am not in a program that focuses on either agriculture or food. Food systems planning is not a core requirement across the board at any planning institution. It has only recently, as recent as the last 10, 15 years, become a subfield of an official subfield of the planning profession. Many of you who are unfamiliar with planning might not know that it's a professional program that is accredited. So in any university that has a department of planning needs to be accredited by a national board. And so our curriculum has to meet national standards. And as per those standards, knowledge around food is an area on which schools get points, but it is not a core area that every school has to have. So for example, if you went to school, let's say on the West Coast, there is not a food systems class on the books outside of Berkeley at a planning program. And this is sort of the case across the country, depending on wherever you might be regionally. And so the question, you know, is like, so what does planning have to do with food? And why am I teaching about food? And why was I hired to teach about food? And how it relates to land use and so forth. So let's do that first. Here we go. So to understand where, you know, we're situated in the Department of Urban Regional Planning and what exactly it is that our graduates might end up doing, planning is an expression of like our values, of human values embodied in the construction of towns and cities. And a lot of times in the mainland, towns and cities look like what it looks like in the picture. And that is not by accident. That is very intentional, that land use is homogeneous and organized in a particular way. And so a lot of what planning does is uses these frameworks of organizing around zoning, growth, you know, permitted uses, density, subdivision regulations, et cetera, and there are ways and means through which our spaces and our communities are constructed. You might not realize it, but the fact that whether you have a park in your community or green space, that has very much to do with how it was planned for and how someone thought some resource, some asset should be placed in a community or not. So basically, everything you experience, we experience in the built environment is very intentional. And planners have played this role of mediating between the built and the natural environment since the late 19th century, which is when planning as a profession kind of evolved and turned into this elite group of people trying to figure out how do we go about organizing our cities in an efficient way at the height of the period of industrialization. So if you come take my planning classes, you'll learn about that history, but that's not why we're here. But
the College of Social Sciences at the University of Hawaii at Mānoa is.
Sorry, I was gonna say, we do have this video of like what planning is all about and what our students learn and what they can go on to do that I will share. But to say that before I came, you know, the focus wasn't on food systems. We didn't teach food systems, and I've been at the college since 2020, so fairly recently. Has food systems now become part of the curriculum? That's not to say that students who graduated prior to me arriving have not gone on to join programs that focus on food, but it was far more difficult for them to sort of have access to those knowledge systems and tools, basically. So I'll play this video to explain what it is that we do.
Committed to students and their engagement in the world. We are a dynamic research university, and we're doing a lot of work in our own backyard here in Hawaii. And we always think of ourselves as a place for people of any background who wants to make change and a positive difference in the world.
What I've really learned from the Department of Urban Regional Planning at University of Hawaii is the sincere compassion from the faculty about thinking of the community and people's needs, and then applying that in the real world, identifying with community groups, finding different partners, collaborating on different projects.
It's exciting to learn from people who really love planning and really care about what they're doing and really care about making a difference and teaching students that they can make a difference and be agents of change. Our program offers both a nice balance between different areas of planning, from environment, transportation and infrastructure, and land use, to social policy and community planning, disaster management, and international planning. Planning is pretty much everything, whether you're interested in climate change issues or you want to make sure that there's enough water for people living on an island, that there's adequate infrastructure in the face of a number of buildings going up, for example, in Kaka'ako. There's a broad range of jobs and different things that people can do, and it just depends on what you're interested in. So there's a number of things people can do with a planning degree.
Okay, so that's a short preview into what our programming does. The Cornerstone, we are only a graduate program. So we don't have an undergrad program that feeds into us. It's how most professional programs are set up, whether it's us or public health. We don't tend to have undergrad programs here and elsewhere where there are other accredited schools. The Masters in Urban Planning is a 42 credit program. We focus on those key 6 core areas But the cool thing about our program is that there is a planning practicum in which students work on real world problems with real world clients and have to develop a response to that problem in terms of a planning report. They have to do a capstone or a thesis, and honestly, the difference between two is very little in our program. So I know Alex is, for example, on this call. Alex Narros is a graduate of the DURP program, and her capstone looked at collaborations and how collaborations in the food system facilitated innovation during COVID, and an excellent piece of research, which then has helped us really think about what innovation looks like during crisis, what collaboration looks like, and all of those things. And people coming out of this program can end up in many different places. For example, like Alex with city and county, or in private firms, like our other graduates who also focused on food systems planning, but also a lot of our graduates end up in the nonprofit sector. And the program really focuses on methods, both practice and research. So there are many different pathways that you can take when you come into the program. So that's the program. Now to talk about my class, which is Plan 616. It isn't called Food Systems Planning on paper. It's called Community-Based Planning. And that's because it's really difficult to change course names, apparently, in the system. So we're just using a pre-existing course name, and I've revamped the syllabus, essentially. And I will be teaching it in the fall. So one of the core reasons as to why food has become such a critical element in planning is because for the longest time, planners have acted in the food system without realizing their actions have real significant impact. Like, for example, if you think about all the coconut trees on Oahu that don't have any coconuts, that's not by accident. There's a zoning requirement that requires them to be neutered. That means that landscapers have to come and cut down the flowers and fruit when they get to a certain level of maturity, so they don't cause liability, especially in our tourist areas. So that's not by accident. The fact that coconut trees on Oahu aren't allowed to have mature fruit. So in that way, planners everywhere across the nation have acted and intervened in the food system without realizing their actions have real consequence. Everything from where grocery stores can be sited to where transportation hubs are to get people across. So even though planners were intervening, they weren't realizing they were actually participating in creating the food system. And so as a result of this, and a lot of activism, scholar activism, community activism, food has suddenly become this focus area in planning that now we're really thinking about through these new generation of scholars. And like in terms of like academic lineage, I would say I am somewhere between third and fourth generation of food system scholars. So the thing is, there aren't many of us either. It started in the early 2000s out of Wisconsin medicine and has spread to certain parts of the country. But there are a lot of scholars interested in food systems planning now. So hopefully, like in the next couple of years, there'll be more of us who can teach and do research and train students in this work. Whereas in the past, we used to think about food in the way, do people have enough food to eat or not? Now, when we're teaching food systems planning, we're really thinking about, the quality of food, the quality of nutrition, the connection between food, health, and the built environment, and how, just by the sheer fact, if you told me what your zip code was, I could tell you what your health outcomes are, or at least your predictive health outcomes, because you live in a certain place. That's how interconnected the built environment and our health are. And we're also thinking about the way in which zoning, permitting, planning influences community development, and to think about food as sort of not just something we produce and consume, but also this vehicle for economic development. So some of the work that's happening at the Leeward Community College is actually quite in fact related to product development, value development. All of that work ties into this aspect. And in this class, and unlike Albie and Noah and Matt, I don't have 6 classes to do all of this work. I have to do it in one class. And in this one class, we touch on systems thinking and framing, critical reflection, social, ecological, and emotional economies of food. Analytical skills is really important to doing data-driven policymaking, and all of it is tied together with experiential place-based learning. I also don't have a farm, so I have to find other places to take my students to get that hands-on experience. And Matt has been a great connector in that way. So all of this happens. We do all of this work and touch on all of these key competencies, right? So like I'll take you quickly through all of them. So in terms of systems framing, we're not just focusing on farmers or consumers. We're thinking about the whole process. And in the orange are the numbers from the national level, and in the green are numbers from Hawaii, actually, or at least, yeah, they're Hawaii numbers. And this is the first time you're probably seeing how many registered manufacturers we have and how many food and grocery stores we have, because that's the first time we found the data to give you those numbers. Those numbers didn't exist before now. So we're understanding what the food system looks like, who the actors are, where power is, and how do we think about that. And we're also thinking about the systems framing in understanding that food security, which is a key outcome of what all of our work kind of like, culminates to, isn't just any one thing. There are multiple dimensions to food security. And to understand this in the context of history and how both food and agricultural revolution and evolution through the ages have shaped that. And this is an example of a rural grocery store that has shut down. And to understand these dynamics between urban and rural spaces and how the food environment is very different in the two places. And then we bring all of that to bear through critical thinking and reflection. Students are required to write a reflection paper for a particular week and lead discussions in class. And this is like one of the key things in class, that we do not talk about food deserts, because what are they? They're labels we've put on communities, but in reality, what they are, they're intentional spaces that have been designed with intentionality, where people in power have decided to disconnect them from critical infrastructure, and where the market has decided it's not worth putting a grocery store. That's what they are. So let's call it that instead of giving it names, because deserts are beautiful ecological landscapes with life. They're not at all equitable. So equatable. So we talk about all of these critical dimensions of food, and we also think about in that critical reflection how we think about how they are already pre-existing structural issues that make food security that much worse for certain groups of people. When we think about this in both upstream and downstream causes and their nature. So to say that food and food systems and getting to this question and answer of food security is complex and nuanced depending on where you are, and needs to be very, very, very context specific. We think about social, ecological, emotional economies of food through the readings we do and the discussions we have and the guest speakers we bring into the class from across Hawaii, but also across the nation. And this is the real emphasis, that the issue of access is very complicated, because food has been a site of power and struggle ever since nation building on this continent started. When I say this continent, I mean the greater United States of America. And that planets cannot intervene if we don't think about that history and bring that history to bear in how we want to move forward. And all of that then goes into the assignments that students are assigned. And here I'm presenting work that one of my students did for this Plan 616 class. So if you were just to take that service area map on its own, you would say, okay, this grocery stores in Kalihi, food security shouldn't be an issue, because if I overlay that with like a 10-minute driving distance, it covers all of Kalihi. But then you look at this market basket study that complements that. This is another piece of data. So what the student did was she took the thrifty food plan, which is one of those columns, and she looked at like what that was giving for each one of these categories. And then she went into these stores, grocery stores, specialty stores, convenience stores, and looked at the prices of each of these things to understand, does this federally mandated plan actually meet the needs of people living in our communities? And as far as Kalihi is concerned, no, because in every single category, food is 2-3 times more expensive than the thrifty food plan allocates money for. And the thrifty food plan is what informs SNAP allocations across the board. So this is the kind of analytical thinking that students are doing and real world problems for Hawaii that they're focused on. And it's taking many different pieces of data and actually creating new pieces of data, because without that market study, we could not answer this question. So those are the skills that students are developing. And then in terms of like data-driven policymaking, this is a study we just recently finished for the city and county, looking at the community garden program. And based on the survey data that we collected, these are the recommendations that graduates of my program who took the food systems class wrote. They wrote all of those recommendations based on the data. And I just like looked it over and said, yes, good work. That's what they're able to do after taking the class. And then I agree with everyone that experiential learning is very important in tying all of these pieces together. And so the students get to work on a farm, not for like a whole year, but like 2 hours, so it's one class, and visit other actors in the food system. So we have like 2 or 3 site visits that are built in to help them connect the pieces from the classroom to what they're seeing to the work that they will be doing. And then Albie asked me to talk about some challenges, and so the challenges are here, and so I'll talk about it real quickly. In terms of like the departmental setup, Plan 616 is an elective. And because it's an elective, there's no resources to teach it. So that means that I don't get a TA for it. I don't get any extra funding to organize any of these other things that we do in the class. So it all falls on whoever the faculty is to teach the class as best as they can. And while there's been immense student interest in the class, not all students in all departments can actually take this class because of the way individual departmental policies are structured around what electives count and what don't. So that's been one of the issues. It's not cross-listed, it's not assessed, class or anything like that. So it's students from CTAHR, for example, who wanted to take it, couldn't actually enroll for it. So I've let them audit the class by force registering them. So sometimes I can do that, but so students take it, but then like auditing a class, they're not required to like participate in the same way. So like I can't evaluate their learning as part of that. So that's been like some of those issues. And there are a lot of knowledge gaps depending on like where students are coming from in their understanding of food systems. So this class isn't only about looking forward, but it's also has to do the job of bringing everyone onto the same page of understanding of where we are and how we got there. So it's not really a barrier, but it does make teaching difficult when people come from many different places in their historical understanding of where we are in time. So one of the things that Albie also asked to talk about is like what we aren't talking about or what we're not doing. And I feel like what we don't really focus on is the complexity of the food system. Yeah, there are all these pieces, they're all intertwined and they're very complex. A lot of times we take a reductionist approach where we're like, yeah, we can apply these same adaptations everywhere, but they don't work. In the same way, the same interventions don't work everywhere because every place is so all this work is so context driven. I did want to leave with some resources if people are interested. I had the privilege of working on this project, Growing Food Connections, as a doctoral student. And as part of this effort, we put together syllabi for food systems planning from across the country. So if you're interested in developing new coursework or seeing what even is out there, you can find it on the website under education. We also put together a local government food policy database if you wanted to see what communities are doing about food across the country. You can search for your community, you can search for a keyword, and you'll see results from across the country. So I just wanted to share that, and that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Subhashni. Thank you. So Subhashni had the opportunity, and she and I think Daniela and Noah all pointed to a couple of limitations in the UH system in terms of enabling students to achieve some of the learning outcomes or competencies that have been envisioned. And so what I wanted to do in our remaining time, we just have about 10 minutes left. I wanted to kind of circle back, starting with Daniela. You mentioned something about, I think, articulation agreements. I'm going to drop it into the chat function. Each panelist, I'd like you to speak briefly to what kind of structural limitations, if you will, exist within the UH system that may limit the achievement of these key competencies or learning outcomes in these areas. So Daniela, would you be willing to pick it up? And I think, in the interest of time, we're going to have to unfortunately keep it brief, but this is not the last conversation we're going to have about this. So Daniela, would you be willing to take it away?
Yeah, what I see is that our students would do their first 2 years here, and then when they try to transfer to Mānoa, for example, the classes that they were taking here, it just doesn't count over there. And I feel like this is something that could be worked on. I mean, we have tried in the past, and maybe with the new leadership of the new dean, we'll get things moving. But an example of a successful articulation agreement is with UH West Oahu, because our students can do their first 2 years here. Their classes count when they transfer. They can see everything in the STAR system. It is an open book. There's no surprises once they transfer. And you would expect that if you are in the same university system, right? So it's kind of upsetting for students when they try to transfer to UH Mānoa to CTAHR, and they get really surprised that they're gonna do an extra year or a year and a half, and they have to retake some of the courses. So yeah, this is stuff that I feel like we really need to work on, because it's just not fair to our students.
Got it. Thank you, Danny. I'll pick it up and transfer it to Matt. I think a couple of issues that really need to be worked on is, and there's a pilot project that enables students to take courses across the University of Hawaii system. It's a pilot level now, but students from Manoa or West Oahu being able to take courses across the system is something that is really an obstacle to students taking complementary coursework across the UH system. And then I know Noah is working on this, but offering a graduate seminar in agroecology and sustainable food systems to give students across different disciplines the basic foundational knowledge in food systems and sustainability, whatever discipline they might be in. Those are a couple of issues I think that are important that we will need to tackle in future conversations. I'll kick it over to Matt, and then Noah, and then Subhashni.
Not to reiterate too much, I think I agree with I think the comments Noah was making initially, and then what Daniela and Albie are reiterating, there are these there's this siloing, and I think that impedes the efficiency of education for students, and I think there are multiple things that we're doing to address this. I'll mention again, we have this Alaska Native Hawaiian supporting grant, Huaka'i Aina project, and that's working to support the creation and standing up courses. Like Albie is introducing a new course that's a 295 level course that is going to be taught in this C3S mode, and I dropped that a link to the C3S program into the chat, and then also we're in that project, we're supporting a coalition and the expansion of a larger conversation like we're having today. So we're looking toward having more focused workshops to address these challenges, growing a network of colleagues to address this. And I'll pass it to Noah.
Thank you, Matt.
And what's Noah supposed to say?
Oh, Noah.
Question number one.
What I was supposed to say is, what do you see? You mentioned this before around silos, for example, but what are some key structural obstacles that you have identified that you think really limit students' ability to pursue their educational pathways in the field of agroecology or sustainable food systems?
Yeah, I mean, I think, echo Daniela in that, I mean, I really think we need better cross-campus coordination. It's not necessarily a pure limitation within UH Manoa, but I mean, looking at the courses Danny puts up, like those are all taught in in TAE, and it's we don't have endless resources, and any professor at the university will tell you that they're teaching over their load and they're stressed and we don't have enough support. And, it seems so silly that given that environment of scarcity and overwork, that then we're teaching the same course 4 different times at 4 different campuses with 4 different professors. Like with technology, today, like there's got to be a ton of different solutions that can improve the efficiency, and then that would free up professors to then teach more integrative classes, right? Like, okay, instead of teaching soil science 3 times, now these 2 people who are teaching soil science can teach about like some interactive component of soils and human health, or you can start to build those more system-based approach courses that build upon each other. So I think there's a lot of efficiency gains. It's not necessarily the roadblock, but I think a opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Noah. Subhashni, did you have an additional comment based on? Go for it.
Well, I've already touched on it. So for me, it's not just interinstitutional, it's within Mānoa too. Like, TPSS students can't take my classes and things like that because my class is not recognized as an elective that qualifies. Same problem with like all students in all programs. But here's the thing, mine is the only 600 level graduate class on food systems planning. I've looked, at the same time. So students want to take the class, but cannot take the class. And so for me, it's this like interdepartmental, interinstitutional thing. And if that means like we set up a different kind of food systems minor, whatever, however you guys did it in Berkeley, maybe that makes sense. So all of these classes can kind of come together. But right now, that's an above my pay grade kind of like, institutional hurdle. Or the best I can do is let the students audit my class because I can control that. But I can't have 20 students auditing at the same time, if word gets out, hey, she'll let you audit, that's fine. But like, yeah.
Well, thank you. I think just want to emphasize, given the limitation on time here, is that this is the start of a conversation. And the HIA grant that Matt and Noah and Danny and I have with other colleagues in the UH system, we have some resources to begin pulling people together to have these very conversations. And I think that some of the issues that we're raising are also recognized by the new UH president, who has called for streamlining certain processes across the UH system, reducing or eliminating articulation agreements to make it easier for students to move through different educational pathways. So I think we would like to thank all the panelists for their participation. I know there's some outstanding questions in the chat. We will follow up with an email response with a recorded video and some responses to any of the questions that we did not have a chance to get to. But I think it's important to leave on the note that this is the beginning of a conversation where we look at the educational objectives of many of the students that we work with and future students and help change some of the conditions within the University of Hawaii system to enable students to achieve these learning objectives and their own professional development goals. So please, I hope you can all participate in these future conversations that Matt and I, Noah, and others will be convening over the coming years, and we'll bring other faculty members into it, but all geared toward identifying and attempting to address some of these systemic challenges. Ioane, do you have any closing comments to make?
Yeah, I do. Well, I wanted to just really quick in the last minute we got, if you could quickly just share if our audience could do anything to help affect change at that level. Who do they contact? What are interested students, who can they talk to get access to these things that aren't connecting to places?
Anybody want to take that one on? I think initially starting with speaking with their faculty members, right, that they have a personal connection with, and saying, hey, I'm really struggling with being able to make a move from Leeward Community College into a program at Mānoa. Like, how are we going to solve for this? And so that way Daniela is empowered to join these conversations that involve, deans and other people at the administrative level and say, hey, we really got to solve this problem because students are taking an additional year, right, to get through their undergraduate degree. So I think, practical responses, speak with the faculty whom you have the greatest comfort level.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Albie. Thank you to all our panelists, all of our guests for coming today. As Albie stated, we'll get to the questions we couldn't cover in the Q&A feature with the follow-up when we send out the link to the YouTube video of this recorded webinar. Please be on the lookout. Join us April 16th. We're going to be talking about food hubs. And I think that's it. We're right at 1:30. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.